$81 million was siphoned away using the SWIFT banking system in one of the largest brazen cyber bank heists of all time. If it were not for a few mistakes, the perpetrators would have managed to steal close to $1 billion. We'll cover how it happened, as well as the lessons and fallout that seems strikingly similar to everyday business and real estate transactions that get hijacked. You may also find this video on our technical channel, where we provide technical explainers and analysis. This channel is dedicated to non-technical cybersecurity content for the non-technical professional. It all started in January 2015, about a year before the heist. Employees at the Bangladesh Central Bank, called Bangladesh Bank, received emails from a job seeker, Razel Alam. In his professional inquiry, he included the link to his resume and a cover letter. At least one employee downloaded the resume and cover letter. What they didn't know is that Razel Alam didn't exist, and the documents contained malware that gave hackers an initial foothold into the bank's network. From there, the hackers moved around the network from computer to computer, and then they performed reconnaissance. At some point, the hackers gained access to a regular office printer located inside a highly secure room on the 10th floor of the bank's main office in Dhaka. This printer was specifically used to print million-dollar transaction records. From the access to multiple computers and the printer, the hackers gained usernames, passwords, cryptographic authentication keys, and SWIFT codes. On Friday, February 5th, 2016, when all Bangladesh offices were officially closed, the bank staff that was still working found that the printer was not working, but they assumed it was a technical glitch, which is common with office printers. When the bank staff finally rebooted the printer, they started receiving messages from the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. The Federal Reserve, where Bangladesh keeps a US dollar account, had received instructions, apparently from Bangladesh Bank, to transfer almost the entire account's funds, around $1 billion. The hackers had initiated the transfer a day earlier on Thursday, February 4th, around 8 p.m. Bangladesh time, when Bangladesh Bank was closed for the weekend, but it was Thursday morning in New York City. Since Bangladesh Bank offices were already closed for the weekend, it gave the hackers a head start. By the time Bangladesh Bank investigated and organized a response, it was already the start of the weekend in New York City when the Federal Reserve offices were closed. In total, 30 SWIFT requests were made using Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT codes. The total of the transfer requests was $951 million. The Federal Reserve had already begun transferring the money on Friday, February 5th, the day after receiving the requests. They initially transferred the money to Bank of New York, Citibank, and Wells Fargo before international wire transfers into RCBC bank accounts in the Philippines that had been opened a few months earlier with fake identities. The upcoming Monday was a holiday in the Philippines, so RCBC Bank was officially closed. Between the different time zones, the Friday closure in Bangladesh and the Monday holiday in the Philippines, the hackers engineered a roughly 5-day head start. Of the hundreds of RCBC Bank branches in Manila, the hackers chose a branch on Jupiter Street. The word Jupiter triggered the transactions to be flagged once they crossed the $101 million mark. This required the remaining 25 transfers to be held up for review because Jupiter is the name of a sanctioned Iranian shipping vessel. Another $20 million was to be transferred to a Sri Lankan charity called the Shalaka Foundation, which had been set up by the hackers' accomplices as a shell company for the stolen money. The hackers made a typo in the transfer request, which prompted one of the routing banks, Deutsche Bank, to flag the transaction to be held for further review. The remaining $81 million that made it through was held in 5 accounts at RCBC in the Philippines. At this point, the $81 million was still very traceable and recoverable. SWIFT is actually a messaging system within a network of banks. It sends messages, not money, from one bank to another. Those messages are for debits and credits in either a bank's account at the counterparty bank or through accounts at a third-party intermediary bank. Those accounts don't actually hold money. They are used to account for dollars the banks hold in their Federal Reserve accounts. When the transfers are finally settled, the Federal Reserve is just debiting and crediting accounts that banks hold with them to reflect the transfers. RCBC Bank then released the funds to the account holders. The dollars in the RCBC accounts were then converted to Philippine pesos using a foreign exchange broker and then transferred back to the RCBC accounts. Once converted to pesos, the money fell outside of the direct jurisdiction of the Federal Reserve, although the funds were still traceable and recoverable, as most countries' banking systems generally cooperate with one another. The money was then moved into casinos and used to buy chips at 3 casinos that were gambled over tables, converted, and redeposited into different accounts. Once the money was converted into casino chips, it became very difficult to trace. Somehow investigators managed to trace some of the money and recover $16 million from one man. Government officials have said that the funds were then moved from the casino to a bank account controlled by an unnamed Chinese-Filipino businessman and ultimately moved overseas and eventually transferred to North Korea. The resulting lawsuits, allegations, and reputational damage are strikingly similar to the fallout from everyday business and real estate transactions that get hacked. Liability usually comes down to confirmation protocols and security of each party's network and systems, including email. The Bangladesh finance minister was quoted saying that the Federal Reserve is liable for all this. The Federal Reserve had sent a message to Bangladesh Bank saying, "Please confirm," and Bangladesh Bank replied that it was false, but the transaction had taken place before Bangladesh Bank's response reached them. So the Federal Reserve in no way can deny its responsibility. The Federal Reserve denied those allegations, later noting in a statement that there is no evidence that any Fed systems were compromised. It added that the transfers were correctly authorized by saying the payment instructions in question were fully authenticated in accordance with standard authentication protocols. In this case, it is unclear how the transactions were confirmed. Were hackers able to confirm their own transactions with their access to the Bangladesh Bank network? Or was there possibly a malicious insider? In 2019, Bangladesh Bank filed a lawsuit in a U.S. court against RCBC over their alleged role. RCBC counter filed a lawsuit against Bangladesh Bank claiming that its reputation had come under vicious and public attack and is seeking at least $1.9 million in damages. The Federal Reserve pledged to help Bangladesh Bank retrieve the money, but has had little progress since. One lesson is clear for transactions of all sizes ranging from real estate to big business deals. Always confirm transactions with a factor outside of the one used to initiate the transactions. Use some other protocol independent from their computer network. Maybe call the person you know at the other party and confirm the details. According to Alta, about 1/3 of all wire transfers initiated in 2020 were targeted with a potential wire fraud scam, although most attempts were blocked or ignored. In 2021, the FBI IC3 received 19,954 business email compromise reports with total adjusted gross losses of about $2.4 billion. Most losses coming from compromised emails used for wire fraud. In 2018, the FBI charged North Korean citizen Park Jin-hyuk. The charges include the Bangladesh Bank heist, creation of the malware used in the 2017 WannaCry global ransomware attack, and numerous other attacks and intrusions, including cryptocurrency theft. Most of the hackers involved in the cyber heist and other cyber crimes are based in a border town near the China-North Korea border.